I didn't call the police because I already knew who they'd arrest. That's not a sentence you expect to say at my age. Not at 72. Not in a house that's been quiet for longer than most people's marriages last. But there I was, barefoot, standing in my kitchen at 2:13 in the morning, staring at a shattered teacup on the floor like it had just confessed something to me. You ever get that feeling? When something is wrong, but not loud wrong, quiet wrong. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The kind that creeps in slowly, rearranges things, waits for you to notice. My back door was open, wide open, and I know I locked it. I always lock it, twice. I even check it before bed, every night, same routine, same order. I don't forget things like that. Not yet. A cold breeze slid across the floor, brushing against my ankles. The curtain moved, soft, slow, like someone had just passed through it. And then I heard it. A faint metallic clink outside. Not random, not wind, deliberate. I didn't go check. That's the first thing you need to understand about me. I notice things, but I don't rush toward them anymore. I stepped back instead, because this wasn't new. Not really. Things had been shifting lately. Subtle things. A chair slightly turned, a photograph angled differently, a drawer not fully closed, small enough to ignore, big enough to remember. And tonight? Tonight wasn't subtle. My eyes drifted toward the hallway, and that's when I saw it. Mud. Fresh. Dark. Still damp. Leading inward. But I hadn't stepped outside all day, so whose footprints were those? My chest tightened as I turned toward the coat rack. One coat was missing. Dark green. I hadn't worn it in months. And suddenly, something clicked into place. A memory. A phone call from earlier that evening. A voice I hadn't heard in decades. Low. Calm. Familiar in a way that made my stomach turn. They said one thing. Just one. You shouldn't have kept it. At the time, I hung up, didn't respond, told myself it was nothing. But standing there now, staring at the open door, the missing coat, the mud that didn't belong to me, it didn't feel like nothing anymore. It felt like a warning I had ignored. I reached for the phone, and before my fingers even touched it, it rang. Unknown number. Of course. I answered. Silence. Just breathing. Then a whisper. Soft. Close. Check the basement. And the line went dead. Tell me something. If you knew something was waiting for you downstairs, would you go look? Because I did. And that's where everything started to come apart. The basement light didn't turn on right away. It flickered. Once. Twice. Like it was hesitating. Just like me. Don't be ridiculous, I muttered under my breath, gripping the railing as I stepped down. Old wiring, that's all. This house is older than most of the people on my street. But still, I didn't like how long that light took to settle. You ever walk into a room and feel like someone's already been there? That's what it felt like. Before I even saw it, I knew something was wrong. The storage cabinet. It was open. I stopped halfway down the last step. Just stopped. Because I never leave it open. Not by accident. Not by forgetfulness. Everything I keep down here has a place. Labels. Order. Structure. Control. Slowly, I stepped closer. Boxes stacked neatly, documents untouched. Everything exactly as it should be, except one. One box was missing, and I didn't need to check the label to know which one. My chest tightened. Not that one, I whispered. That box hadn't been opened since 1989. Not once. Not even when I moved everything else around it. Some things you don't revisit. Not because you forget, but because you remember too clearly. I crouched slowly, staring at the empty space where it used to sit. And just like that, I was 35 again. Same hands, same instincts, different life. Back then, I worked as a municipal records clerk. Quiet job, predictable. I liked it that way. Paper doesn't lie unless someone forces it to. That's where I met Alaric Boone. He was 42 then, a contractor, the kind of man who walked into a room and didn't waste movement. Everything about him was deliberate, even the way he spoke, measured, precise. He noticed things, including me. At first, it was harmless, casual conversations, small talk over files and signatures, until one evening, he handed me something he wasn't supposed to. A file, thin, unmarked. "Process this quietly," he said. I remember flipping it open and immediately feeling off. No ownership records, no tax history, no prior permits, nothing. It was like the building inside that file had never officially existed. I looked up at him and said, "This isn't real." And he just smiled. "Exactly." I refused. I told him I wouldn't process something that didn't exist. The next day, the file was gone. So was he. No goodbye, no explanation, just gone. And 3 weeks later, the building burned down. That's what they said, anyway. Electrical fire, case closed. But I knew better. Because before that file disappeared, I copied one document. Just one. I don't even know why I did it. Instinct, maybe. Or fear. I kept it. Locked it away. In that box. The one that's missing now. Back in the present, my knees creaked as I stood up slowly. "They took it," I said out loud, though there was no one there to hear me. But something didn't make sense. If someone broke in just to take that document, why leave everything else untouched? Why call me? Why warn me at all? My thoughts snapped as my foot nudged something on the floor. I looked down. A key. Small, cold, definitely not mine, attached to a faded tag. I picked it up slowly, turning it toward the light, and when I read what was written on it, my breath caught. Unit 3. Still standing. Still standing? That building was supposed to be gone. So tell me, if something that was erased suddenly isn't, what else wasn't destroyed? And more importantly, who made sure I found that key? Still standing. I must have said it a dozen times on the drive over. Still standing. Still standing. Because there are only two possibilities, aren't there? Either I've been wrong for 37 years, or someone went to extraordinary lengths to make sure I stayed wrong. Which one would you believe? I didn't wait for daylight to settle my nerves. By the time the sun started rising, I was already in my car, the key resting in my palm like it had weight far beyond metal. I knew exactly where I was going. Or at least, I thought I did. The old district had changed. Of course it had. New paint, new signage, cafes where storage units used to be. People walking around like history hadn't been quietly rearranged beneath their feet. But when I turned that final corner, I felt it. That same feeling from the basement. That quiet wrongness. Because the building was there. Not burned, not abandoned, standing, clean, renovated, alive. Different name on the front, of course, something modern, forgettable. But the structure, the bones, I recognized them instantly. I didn't get out of the car right away. I just sat there, hands gripping the wheel, staring. Because this meant something very simple. The fire wasn't destruction. It was theatre. I finally stepped out. Each step toward the entrance felt heavier than it should have, like I was walking into something that had been waiting, not for someone, but specifically for me. Inside, everything was too neat, too polished. Hallway lights bright but cold. Doors aligned perfectly. No scuff marks, no personality. You ever walk into a place that looks lived in, but doesn't feel lived in? That's what this was. I moved slowly down the hall. Unit 1, Unit 2, and then Unit 3. My hand tightened around the key. I hesitated, just for a second, because once a door like this opens, it doesn't close the same way again. But I inserted the key anyway. It fit. Of course it did. The lock clicked, loud, final. I pushed the door open. Inside, immaculate. Minimal furniture, a couch, a table, nothing personal, no photos, no clutter. It didn't feel like someone lived here. It felt like someone used it. My eyes landed on the table, a folder, placed dead center, waiting. For me? I whispered, already knowing the answer. I stepped closer and opened it. And that's when my stomach dropped. Photographs. Dozens of them. Me, walking down my street, sitting in my living room, sleeping in my chair. Angles that shouldn't exist unless someone had been inside my house. Not once, not recently. For years. My throat tightened. "You've been watching me," I said, though I didn't know who I was speaking to. "Oh, Narissa." The voice came from behind me, calm, measured, unchanged. I turned slowly. And there he was, Alaric Boone. Older, yes, lines where there weren't before, hair thinner, but the same eyes, the same stillness, like time had adjusted around him but never touched him. He stepped inside and closed the door gently behind him. "No need to be afraid," he said. And somehow, that made it worse. "You've already done the hard part," he continued. "You kept it safe." My voice came out sharper than I expected. "Safe from what?" He tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was part of a process he'd already calculated. "From being forgotten." The room felt smaller, tighter. "What is this place?" I demanded. He didn't rush his answer. "The building was never meant to exist publicly," he said. "It was a storage site for records that couldn't be acknowledged." "What records?" "People," he said simply. That word lingered, cold, heavy. People who were removed, rewritten, reassigned, histories adjusted to fit a cleaner narrative. My grip tightened. "And that document I kept." His eyes locked onto mine. "Proof," he said, "of the system, of me, of everything we made disappear." Silence filled the space between us. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest for decades. You've been watching me all this time. He didn't hesitate. We needed to know if you'd ever look again. A pause, a long one. And if I did? I asked. For the first time, something in his expression shifted. Not much, but enough. That's when we decide, he said quietly, what to do with you. So let me ask you, if someone has been watching you your entire life, waiting for you to make the wrong move, would you already be too late? You made a mistake coming back. I said it before I even realized I was going to speak. And no, I wasn't talking about him. I was talking about the moment, the setup, the illusion that this room, this building, this carefully constructed silence still belonged to him. Because it didn't. Not anymore. Alaric studied me differently now. Not like before, when everything about me was predictable, contained, observed. Now he was recalculating. You don't sound afraid, he said. I was, I replied calmly. For a very long time. I gestured toward the photographs spread across the table. All of this, the watching, the waiting, you built it around one assumption. And what's that? He asked. That I wouldn't change. There it was. A shift. Small, but real. You ever notice how control slips? Not all at once, just a fraction, a flicker. Enough. You've been watching me to see if I'd act, I continued. But you never considered something else. His eyes narrowed slightly. What did you do, Narissa? I took a slow breath. Because this was the moment everything finally stopped being theirs. For 37 years, I said, I kept that document exactly where you expected it to be. He didn't interrupt, didn't move, but I could feel it, the tension tightening beneath that calm exterior. But not where it actually was. Silence. Heavy. Pressurized. The box you took, I said, tilting my head slightly. That wasn't the original. That landed. I saw it. Not panic, not yet, but disruption. You're lying, he said, though his voice lacked certainty. I shook my head slowly. No, I learned something from you, Alaric. I stepped closer, not aggressively, just enough to remove the distance he was used to controlling. You don't hide something important in one place, I said. You create the illusion that you did. His jaw tightened. How many? He asked. Enough, I replied. That was the truth. Copies. Not just one, not just two. Carefully made, carefully placed. Over years. Because I didn't trust my fear, but I trusted time. And 3 days ago, I added, I sent one. That's when it changed, fully. Sent it where? He asked, sharper now. To someone who doesn't ignore things that don't make sense. He stepped forward, closer than before. Who? I met his eyes. A journalist. The word didn't echo, but it might as well have, because everything he built relied on silence, and I had just broken it. You don't understand what you've done, he said. I understand perfectly, I replied. For decades, I thought I was protecting myself. I let that sit, then finished it. I was protecting you. And there it was. The reversal. Not loud, not dramatic, just undeniable. In the distance, faint but unmistakable. Sirens. Not close, but coming. Alaric heard them too. Of course he did. His mind was already moving, calculating exits, contingencies, names he could become. But something was different now. This wasn't something he could erase quietly. "You think this ends with a story?" he asked. I didn't answer right away, because we both knew this wasn't an ending. It was exposure. And exposure doesn't ask permission. The sirens grew louder, closer. And for the first time in 37 years, Alaric Boone didn't look in control. So tell me, what happens when the person who's been watching is finally seen? 3 days. That's all it took. 37 years of silence, undone in 3 days. The article went live at 6:12 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was already awake, sitting in my chair, hands folded, waiting. Not nervously, not pacing, just waiting. You ever reach a point where the outcome doesn't scare you anymore? Only the delay does. The journalist's name was Elio Marr, 39. I chose him carefully. Not because he was loud, but because he wasn't. He had a reputation for one thing. He didn't publish unless he could prove everything. And I gave him exactly that. The document, the copies, the patterns, the inconsistencies no one else had lined up. By noon, it was everywhere. Not sensationalized, not exaggerated. Worse. Precise. Cold. Undeniable. The building, the records, the erased identities. And woven through all of it, Alaric Boone. Not as a suspect, as a constant. Authorities didn't have the luxury of ignoring it. Too many details matched. Too many fragments suddenly made sense when placed side by side. By the second day, the building was raided. Unit 3 wasn't empty anymore. It was evidence. Hidden compartments, archived files, names, some incomplete, some intact. Not everything was recovered, but enough. Enough to confirm it wasn't a theory. It was a system, carefully embedded, quietly maintained. And now, visible. They arrested him that same week. No chase, no spectacle. He was found at a transit station under a different name, holding a ticket that wouldn't have mattered anymore. That's the thing about systems like his. They only work when no one is looking. And now, everyone was. Families came forward, questions surfaced. People who had been misplaced in records suddenly weren't. Some reunions happened, some didn't, because not everything comes back clean. That's the part no one likes to say out loud. As for me, I watched it all from the same chair where this began. Same room, same walls. But it didn't feel the same. There was no weight pressing on my chest anymore. No quiet dread sitting in the corners. Just stillness. The kind that doesn't hide anything. A reporter came to my door a few days later, knocked twice, waited, knocked again. I stood on the other side and listened. For a long moment, I considered opening it, telling everything, letting them turn me into something visible. But I didn't. I've spent decades being watched without my permission. Now, I decide when I'm seen. Weeks later, I went back to the building. It was sealed off, marked. No one going in, no one coming out. No more pretending it didn't exist. I stood across the street and looked at it one last time. Not with fear, not with anger, just recognition. Then I reached into my coat pocket, the key. Unit 3. I turned it over in my fingers, feeling its weight for the last time. And then I dropped it into the storm drain. Gone. Not hidden, not saved. Just finished. I turned and walked away. No footsteps behind me, no eyes on my back, no one waiting. For the first time in longer than I can measure, I wasn't being watched. And that was enough.